Stats in video games. You know what I'm talking about, right? The funny numbers and colourful diagrams you might see in the summary of a brand new character or vehicle you've just acquired. In some video games, you gather resources, money, experience, and invest them to increase the maximum potential of our weapons and gear. And I think I speak for everyone that it's just so satisfying to see those numbers go up. But it's not just about making these characters more powerful. Stats can also be used to compare and contrast between similar characters to build teams to take into battle. Sounds familiar, huh? Oh. Introducing the Battlecats. That silly little video game where you gather and collect cute and cuddly cats. And kill things. Take over the world. And bite God's little toe.
The hell? Stop it.
Surely the game that revolves around assembling a team to face off against scary and powerful foes will provide the necessary means to do so. Let's take a little look. Okay, I just booted up the game, and as you can see to the left there, we have an upgrade menu. Off to a pretty good start. Let's go upgrade a cat. Oh yes, the samurai cat. Go on then, let's level him up. Well then, without further ado, let's get the samurai to level 2. Woo! Oh nice, he leveled up. What does that mean? Where's his stats? What actually improved here? Ah yes, the cat guide. That's probably where they are, right? Samurai, where's your stats? A very well-rounded cat. Really? I certainly couldn't tell. Well, I'm here in the equip menu and still no sign of any stats for our units. Could it be they don't tell you anything? But why? Why is it that the Battlecats hides this information from the player? And should stats be added to the game anyway? Let's discuss it together. Yep, that means you too. I went over to our YouTube community page to ask you this very question, which to my surprise, a lot of you actually responded. We did a poll too, but we'll reveal the results of that at the end. Now with that out of the way, let's start discussing, because I've been thinking about this topic for quite a while now. So, before we begin, I would just like to make a few things clear before going forward. The reason I'm making this video is for me to put out some of my opinions about the lack of stats for units in the Battlecats, as well as explore reasons why Ponos would make this decision in the first place. I want to get an idea of how some of you feel too. While it would be nice to see some changes, I'm aware the likelihood of this happening is very low. As such, my goal here is to just have fun talking about something I feel passionate about. I also want to make it clear that I've only been playing the Battlecats for about over a year now. I still consider myself an early mid-game player, and due to how I play without spoilers, there may be bits of information I might get wrong, or I'm just completely unaware of. So if you have any critiques, feel free to let me know. Lastly, I'm only going to be focusing on cat units and not enemy units. As some of you have pointed out, enemy magnification would make knowing the base stats of these units pretty much useless, unless you had a calculator. I never actually had any intentions talking about enemy units when I decided to make this video, so I think I should have made that clearer in the community post. Enemy units are a minefield that I would rather not tackle right now. With that all being said, let's move on with the video. So what stats can we see in the Battlecats? Well, from what I can gather, stats are treated like there's some ancient myth or secret legend passed down from generation to generation. And this is what we're left with.
What do you think of these?
These? Seems to be stat resources. But I've never seen this type on Earth. I don't know where these stats came from, but we cannot let it fall into Nadu's hands.
We're usually given a light suggestion of their existence through either their character introductions presented in the cat guide, or when evolving a unit into their true form. It's just all very vague though. Out of all the information regarding our units, only these are shown to us in full. Cost, attack type, abilities, and finally, traits. That's it. Everything else, as previously stated, is only suggested to us in certain descriptions, but we're never actually told the exact amounts. Hell, we're not even told which stats and by how much they improve when leveling or evolving a unit. It's all just so secretive. The thing is, this is all incredibly valuable information. Information we could be using when building our teams. Doesn't that defeat the point of the game? Why do this? I remember recently I was talking to my mod Halucha about the Suspect campaign. He was giving me all the clues and resources so I could make my own decision on who was guilty. Spoiler alert, I got it wrong. I digress though. The thing that struck me was when he said this about the Morse code puzzle. This game is supposed to be for kids. Which is true, oddly enough. Which could be the reason why the game is so bare bones in terms of providing stats for units. I'm going to take my first quote from Reggie, who said this. Quote, "No stats makes good use of the wiki. Also makes the UI and stages less cluttered." Now Reggie pointed out a few other things in this comment, however I would like to focus on the menu UI for this segment. Ponos wants their game to be accessible to all types of players. Too many stats in the UI can be confusing, especially when you consider each stat is going to require some explanation to the player. There have been times where I've been put off by a video game because it gives too much information at the start. Sometimes we just want to get straight into the game and not read walls of text. And I think the battlecats does a pretty good job of this. Any text in the game is usually very brief. New mechanics and menus are also unlocked as you progress through the game to keep things simple. Just look at the starting menu. There's almost nothing here. But hey, at this point in the game, do you really need to know about the existence of MP? This could also explain why upgrading is so simple too. All you need to do is hit the upgrade button, and that's it. We know our cat has gained strength, I think, because their level has gone up by 1. For someone starting out, this is pretty much all you need to know. At this point in the game, knowing how much attack and HP a unit has isn't really important, as the stages themselves are pretty basic. All you need to do is go into battle, spawn your units, and watch them wreak havoc, which I have to say is pretty fun to watch. I'm going to take another quote, this time from Random Full Name, who said this. Quote, "Part of the fun in the battlecats is making wacky loadouts to see what works, and having HP/damage stats would ruin that fun." I do agree, part of the fun of the battlecats is using all these fun and silly cats. Take me for instance when I first started.
Come on, my son, destroy them all! My son, please don't kill him. He's whack.
I didn't know what any of these units were capable of. I just used what I thought was funny. Now put yourself in a position where you had to choose between two characters, and you knew one was better than the other. What would you choose? If you're not an idiot like me, you'd choose the more powerful unit because the game is providing you with the information to make that observation. Without that information though, well, maybe it's down to which one you like more. And when you're playing easy stages, who needs damage when you have the power of the funny, am I right? Like, this game certainly doesn't take itself too seriously, does it? Which could be a reason why Ponos decided to exclude stats from the game. It could be the reason why there are so many cats to begin with too. It's for you to have fun with the goofy characters. Ponos want you to use these cats. Even if they're not viable, they want you to see the effort they put into making these characters so lovable, rather than just focusing on just numbers. And I think deep down we all have our favourite funny characters, who may not even be that good, but we still love them, for their appealing design and animations. Take this funny character for example. They put a lot of effort into making the animation so silly. Don't you think they would want you to at least try using it? Having stats in the game would actively discourage you from using this unit, because you'll compare the stats and come to the conclusion it's just not worth using. As someone who loves the funny characters and purposely chooses them despite chat's disagreements, I really appreciate this, and I'm sure many others in the community do too. Speaking of community, let's talk about the battlecats community. Starting off with a quote from Amurif. Quote, what Lucas said in one of his streams. Without the usage of scene stats, there wouldn't be this bug of a community the battlecats has created. If you haven't heard Lucas's perspective on this topic and you want some more context, I've put a link to the video down in the description below. Watch it now or later, it's up to you. Anyway, one thing I personally noticed when playing the battlecats for the first time is just how friendly the battlecats community is. It's odd to see a bunch of strangers come together wanting to see me succeed by trying their best to inform me of the information the game lacks, rather than lie and see me fail. I remember after streams I would say to myself, I've never seen anything like this. This community is so nice. And trust me, I've been on the internet for a long time, and I have to say, that is very unusual. With no stats, players have been conditioned to rely on each other and work together to solve problems. From what I've heard from the boomers, back in the day, information was pretty scarce, so the likelihood of you beating a difficult stage on your own was very low. Your best bet was to search online for help from the community, through online discussions and YouTube tutorials of people sharing their discoveries. As an example, let's take a look at Nurse Wooper's video on beating floor 30 of Heavenly Tower Uberless. This video was brought to my attention by my mod Mudkip. Thanks, man. And after taking a look, I think it's a great example of players coming together for a common goal. Now, as we know, Heavenly Tower 30 these days has been heavily power crept due to more wave immune units being introduced. However, 7 years ago, there were far less wave immune units in the game. Some players relied on wave immune Ubers, but to expect every player to get lucky enough to obtain these was a little unrealistic. So beating floor 30 Uberless would have been very beneficial to players who weren't lucky enough and needed a solution. Now, if we take a look at the description of the video, we find out how Nurse Woofer was able to achieve this amazing run. Quote, major props to Lucas IV and Kazza for helping me achieve this victory. Lucas pretty much inspiring me to keep going after he got 9%, and talking about how well Slow Cannon and Swimmer are here. While Kazza helped me figure out that it's best to rush Lorax non-stop and also run Cool Japan. So from this quote, we can understand that the advice given to Woofer by both Lucas and Kazza played an important part in this run being successful. Now equipped with the information needed, all Woofer had to do was perform the run, and they performed so well in fact. Just like with how Woofer was inspired by Lucas's 9% run, Woofer's run went on to inspire plenty of other members of the community to try the strategy themselves, even providing useful tips and loadout details in the description. Since there were no stats in the game, knowing that, for example, Swimmer is able to survive a hit from Hermit at level 39 would have been impossible for most. However, thanks to this video and Lucas's discovery, this has now become common knowledge to this day, even making its way to me in my run. So it just goes to show, even with a lack of information, through sheer perseverance and trial and error, the community could still come together to make a major breakthrough such as this. So I think it's safe to say that the lack of stats has had a positive impact on the community by encouraging players to work together and to help new players starting out. So much in fact that I think helping other players is ingrained into the very culture of the battlecats community. A similar thing happened to Team Fortress 2 when shareable taunts were added to the game. More specifically, the Conga. When the Conga was first introduced, you used to have servers filled to the brim with players on both teams all doing the Conga together. It was almost like an infectious virus. It's not to the same degree nowadays as it was back then, but if someone starts a Conga, well, there's a good chance someone on the enemy team will join you. Again, it's something that's ingrained into TF2's culture, just like with the battlecats and sharing information. And this is all thanks to Ponos not including stats in the game. That's pretty cool, isn't it? I do think this culture is something very special that needs to be preserved. So that does make me wonder, if Ponos decides to add stats to the game now, would the culture surrounding the community remain as friendly as it has? It's hard to say really, as it all depends on how Ponos implement the stats in the first place. I think if they told the player too much information, this could have some
unforeseen consequences.
As Lucas mentions in his video, players will choose to search online for the stats the game lacks. Now, if Ponos were to provide these stats to us natively, do you think players would have a need to search online? I'd say probably less so. This could have a negative impact on the community, as there'll be less new players to help out, since they won't have a reason to expose themselves to the community in the first place. But let's say they do find a community. Would they stay around for long? Aside from late game battle strategies, there just wouldn't be much else you'd need info on. So in all honesty, it could result in a more isolated feeling community. This is all just speculation, mind you, but it's interesting to think about. I do think if done correctly, however, we could still retain our friendly community while still providing some quality of life improvements with stats. They just need to be selective on what they choose to tell us, while leaving some bits of information hidden, similar to what they do in Pokemon. In Pokemon, stats are given to the player in full. We know exactly what our Pokemon is capable of, so team building can be done in-game. However, there are some additional mechanics with stats that are kept vague. But that's where the community and the wiki come into play. They're used as an extension to our knowledge of the game, and don't act as a necessity, like with the battlecats, which I think is the perfect balance Pono should aim for. There wouldn't be a need to replace the wiki, since the less known but equally important information could be found on there. And at the same time, players will have enough information in the base game to make their own decisions without relying on the community too much. It's come to the point where I'm conscious during my own playthrough that I rely too much on chat. I'm a pretty independent person, and I don't really like people doing everything for me. But when I decide to ignore chat to make my own decisions, I start to freeze up. With no information to base my decision on, I'm just left to guessing, which can be very frustrating. So the question is, what stats do we add to the game to meet this compromise? I think this is honestly a very difficult question to ask, as any changes we make will have some kind of positive or negative impact on the game. So I think in this instance, it's best to start out small, perhaps just to test the waters. Rather than adding multiple stats to the game, let's restrict ourselves to just one for now. This way, if things go wrong, the damage will at least be minimal. As a bonus, this should keep the UI clean, as the addition will be quite small, and players who like to experiment won't be given too much additional information. So I asked in our community post what stats people thought were the most important to add. I think now is a good time to see what you guys think. Out of all the stats not included in the game, range seems to be the most popular among you. But why should we add this stat over the others? Here's another quote from Random, who I think best describes why range should be added to the game. Quote, "Literally just range. Some animations are so misleading. Windy, Megacat, etc. Blind spots too. To explain, each unit has what is called a standing range, which is how far away a target needs to be before the unit will begin its attack animation. You can usually see this when a cat immediately stops in place to attack. The thing is, sometimes the animation of the attack, as Random said, doesn't actually reflect where the damage is being inflicted. Take Ultimate Galaxy Cosmo! For instance, in this example, Galaxy Cosmo is charging up his attack, but when he actually throws the punch, you can clearly see a projectile flies to the end of the stage. Now, if you were a new player, I think it's safe to assume that you'd think he has global range, right? This is actually incorrect though. Ultimate Galaxy Cosmo's range is 850, which is about this far away from the target. Anything beyond this range doesn't receive any damage, even though we can clearly see the projectile pass through every enemy. It also doesn't help that feedback in the battlecats is not the greatest. We have damage indicators such as the damage sound effect and visual effect. However, with so many cats on the field, these effects play non-stop. So when a unit like Galaxy Cosmo attacks, even when he has dealt damage, it feels like he didn't do anything at all. At least in Galaxy Cosmo's case though, against his respective type, it's easier to tell because he has guaranteed KB and freeze. In other words, feedback. However, for other units, well, your guess is as good as mine. So as you can imagine, especially for new players, knowing how far a unit reaches can be quite the challenge. Fortunately for us, the battlecats at least tells us which characters are long range using the long range ability. But wait, Nadu, why do we need a range stat when we have the long range ability? Maybe we don't need the range stat. Wait, why doesn't Cosmo have this? He has 850 range. He is by definition a long range unit. Look, it doesn't even say in his character description. What's going on? Well, remember at the end of Random's quote when they said blind spots too? Yeah, that's what this is. So it turns out the ability long range isn't actually telling us that a unit has high range. Instead, it means that this unit has a nerf? This icon is so misleading. Okay, just to clarify, that was a joke. Long range does have a valuable use. To quickly explain, units without this ability deal damage anywhere within their standing range. However, units with this ability can deal damage beyond the standing range, within their own area of effect, usually leaving a blind spot where no damage is dealt. This is excellent against pesky backliners such as the evil Seahorsey. However, this doesn't change the fact that this ability is just flat out confusing, and I think I've had it explained to me at least 3 times now. Anyway, what I believe Random was referring to was the fact that they would like battlecats to tell us where this effective range is, due to the bad visual clarity, just like with standing range, which against certain enemies, knowing where the effective range is often crucial to success. And as it stands, this very important stat the way it is now is just too confusing. For just this reason alone, I really think this should be added to the game. It's unfair that we're expected to try these cats, only to get more confused due to these animations. Like, I just find it funny that a 850 effective range unit has no indicator whatsoever that they're long range, with the only way of telling being their standing range, which can be difficult to see due to the sheer amount of units on screen at once. And it also has a misleading animation to boot. This is honestly just ridiculous. Anyway, I think enough has been said about range. As for the other stats, I think I'll leave them to you guys. If you think another stat should be added into the game over range, I'd love to hear your opinion. I'd break it down here myself, however if I do, this video may end up being too long. So let's move on to something else, or more specifically, talents and the information surrounding them. Let's say that Ponos is keen on not adding any unit stats into the game. Well, I think there are some quality of life improvements that can be made with talents instead. Here's a quote from the Mud of the Kip. Quote, "One thing I really wish they would add stat-wise is showing how much HP, attack, cost, speed, cooldown, and attack frequency talents actually modify the unit on that talent's bubble. This is something that's baffled me too, and to be honest, somewhat irritates me. To explain, talents are the bonus upgrades you buy for a unit once they have reached their true form. A small talent button will appear under the unit in the upgrade menu. From here, you are given a few talents to purchase, using a currency known as MP, which is acquired by exchanging cat dupes you receive from the capsule machine. For each talent, we are given a small description of what they do, and if they're a one-time purchase or not. The thing that Mudkip is referring to are these stat enhancement talents that change the base stats of a unit, such as attack and defense buff, which in the description does not tell the player by how much the talent modifies the stat, which can be a little annoying. Here's an example. Did you know that the HP and attack buff, when purchased, buffs the corresponding stat by exactly 2% of the base value? Which means on units with low HP, for instance, the HP buff basically does nothing. This is so frustrating because it's making me waste my valuable MP. And as a new player, I'm none the wiser. See, I'm lucky. I have a chat to tell me these things. But little Toby playing the game for the first time ain't so lucky. By the way, these talents don't come cheap. NP is an incredibly valuable resource. Even when you think you've built up a good supply, it can all be gone in an instant. The least Ponos could do is have the courtesy to tell players what their investment is going towards. I'd also like to add, if it were up to me personally, I'd like all talents to have the same treatment, not just the stat enhancement talents. For the reason that, again, MP is a big investment. So when I upgrade slow on Enchantress, I'd like to know for how much longer the enemy will be slowed down for. I think there really needs to be better clarity with these abilities. Like, I know I haven't been the wisest when it comes to spending my resources, but I find it annoying that resource management is basically thrown out the window because of the lack of clarity. This problem surrounding resource management is an issue that extends even to spending XP. When I'm browsing through my units to do a little upgrading, more often or not, the process leaves me very unsatisfied, which is due to the fact that I can't see the before and after of an upgrade. Like, yeah, my unit gained a level, cool, but was that 1.5 million XP worth it? Or was it better to invest into something else? I don't know, the game didn't give me anything to base my decision on. I'm just spending XP without really thinking. One of the things that I really enjoy about playing games free to play is managing my resources and taking care every time I make a purchase. Because as a free to play, you are limited on how much you can get of these resources, which should encourage some critical thinking. However, everything I buy in the battlecats, just like with picking units for a battle, is usually just blind guessing and hoping for a good result. Unlike with other free-to-play games I've played in the past, which clearly show you the relevant information you need to decide what upgrades to prioritize and what upgrades to save for later. The same can be said about deciding what to do with dupe units, which can either be converted into MP or redeemed as a plus level. When receiving a plus level, units only gain 20% of their base HP and attack stat, or even less once they reach higher levels. The 20% is just not worth it on some units, and you'd rather take the 5 or potentially 50 MP. However, the game doesn't tell you this information, or at least give you a vague idea. So for a new player, rather than figuring out which units are worth redeeming using their own judgment, again, we're back to guessing, which in this case, it's not very fun. And even when you do redeem a plus level, sometimes you're just left wondering, is it even worth it? All in all, while I do understand that upgrading is very simple and is great for introducing new players into the game, once you get past the early game, upgrading as a whole in battlecats becomes really dull. Like I said earlier, I think a little more clarity is in order, and we should be told what these levels and talents are actually doing. So when it comes to investing these resources, we use our own judgment and critical thinking on what upgrades are worth the money or redeem, which would result in a more satisfying upgrading process. I know that we can use the wiki to find out what these upgrades do, but I'm gonna be honest, looking at a bunch of numbers in a grid isn't as fun compared to upgrading in the actual game. I know we want the wiki to have its uses and to preserve that culture we talked about earlier, but as it currently stands, I feel like in order to just play the battlecats beyond the early game, you are required to look on the wiki for information. And I feel like the scales are too much in favor of that. Here's a quote from Anto. It would be nice to see if my units outrange the enemy or how much damage my unit will do at a certain level. That stuff will be very much appreciated to see in game. Otherwise, I have to go to the wiki. And I'm not saying that the wiki is bad at showing stats, quite the opposite. It's super good, but the time it takes for me to look up a stage can be used to play the actual game. I agree with Anto here. There really should be a balance between going on the wiki for information and playing the battlecats. I just find it really strange that if I wasn't so strict on not spoiling myself, chances are I would probably be spending the majority of my playtime with this game not playing the game. At the start of the video, I praised the battlecats for not having too much information. But now we have the reverse, and I can see, based on recent points we've made, a lack of information is something to be criticized as well as praised, because it's that very aspect that's either ruining my gameplay experience or flat out taking me out of the game entirely, just to look at walls of text, but now somewhere else. I know I said earlier I wanted the wiki to still be useful and the community to continue its trend of helping others, but as far as I'm aware, the scales are out of balance and need to be adjusted. I also want to make it clear I'm not criticizing the wiki here, but the game itself. What they're doing is amazing, and I can tell just from looking at the things I can see that this site was produced with a lot of love and care. And I think the people that run this site should be praised for their effort. Without this resource and the community effort, playing the battlecats would be much like what I just discussed. Making blind choices without any thought, hoping you win the cat lottery, which for some might be your ideal gaming experience. And that's fine, but for me personally, I just don't find that very fun. And I would rather have at least something in the game that I can use to make my own decisions. And if I win or lose, that's on me to learn from and readjust my strategy. But with that said, I think that's all I have to say on this topic for now. And I would like to summarize how I feel about what we've talked about in this video. When I first started making this, I was fully in the idea of battlecats needs to add stats into the game. This was my own bias at the time, and I still feel strongly about some of the points we just made in favour of stats being added. However, now I'm nearing the end of this script, having rewritten it twice now, I've tried to look at this topic with more of an open mind. Because as writing this, I've exposed myself to some points in favour of not adding stats, which I have to say are also valid and I agree with. I can say that there are pros and cons in either direction the game moves in. Continue as normal without stats, allowing the game and community to keep its identity, creativity, and simplicity, but at the cost of the base game being confusing, misleading, and sometimes boring. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, as both ideas have valid points, which is why I came up with compromises to please both ideas. There are a couple more I can think of. One, we could add stat bars to the game, which don't tell you the exact stats, but give you a rough idea of a unit's potential. This means you can still compare and think for yourself, while also leaving the exact numbers to the wiki for when you want to learn more. And two, for people who don't want to see stats, here's one final quote from Showed. Quote, "If they added stats, I would hope it wasn't everything, and either way, I'd want some way to not see them, and it would be the default." I think this is a good idea, though I'm not sure if Ponos would agree, since hiding your recovery code is still not an option. Please make it an option. But allowing players to hide stats if they don't want to see them, I think is fair enough. Or better yet, have the stats be a clickable button in the menus, so if you're not interested, well, the choice is yours. Also, I think stats should be an unlockable feature, so that new players don't get confused at the start. I think it's fair to say that after Emperor of Cats 3 is where the game truly begins, and could be a good reward for beating Bun Bun for the first time. So to conclude, I will admit it's a bit anticlimactic to end with mixed feelings. However, I would like to remind people that my goal isn't to change anything in the battlecats. I'm very happy with how the game is. It's a lot of fun. I just found the topic interesting and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. And hopefully you found it interesting too, and have formed your own opinions on the topic as well. So don't hesitate to let us know what you think in the comments. Speaking of what you think, so I think many of you are wondering what the results were of our poll that I put out 3 weeks ago. Damn, I was slow with this one, wasn't I? I'm going to be honest, when I put this poll out, these results were not the ones I was expecting. I honestly thought when it came to stats, we were going to have a majority vote against stats being added. I was quite aware at the time that many felt the community being so strong was because of the lack of stats. So in the morning, when I checked to see how the post was doing, you can probably imagine how surprised I was. In the spirit of the video, here's some stats. Out of the 349 people who voted, 62% as of now were pro stats, while a shocking 5% was for no stats. And finally, we had 34% of votes who wouldn't mind. We also had 22 comments from members of the community, which I will display on screen now for everyone to see in full. I would like to say a big thank you to all you peeps. While I didn't use everyone's comments in the video,
I am the spy.
I did read them all, and I really appreciate you took the time to write these to me. This video would not have been possible without you, as some of the topics I spoke about today were based on your comments. So again, thank you. Okay, I think that's about it. I would like to end by saying thank you for watching, and I hope you peeps enjoyed. Despite this being very different from the usual videos I make, I must admit this has been quite the learning experience for me. And honestly, I really enjoyed writing my thoughts on this topic, even if it's out of my comfort zone. Writing is not something I would say is my forte, but I think it's good to break the mold every now and then and try something new, especially since the main series has been on break as of late. But with this video being done now, I think it's about time we shift back to the main series. And boy, do I have a special episode in store for you. It may, however, take some time to produce. So as much as it pains me to say this, I'm gonna have to ask for everyone's patience once again. But once the Hermit video is done, you can expect an upload once every week or so. Because, I'm not gonna lie, I miss the main series too. In the meantime, if you can't wait, feel free to head on over to the VOD channel, where you can find all my unedited live streams. Link in the description. Also, if you're new to the channel and are interested in a British man playing the battlecats with a fresh perspective, you can head on over to twitch.tv/Fazandu790 and give us a follow. I suppose while you're at it, you can also subscribe as well. Because I've heard if you do, Nadu promises to eat a can of cat food whilst hiding in his wardrobe for your amusement. I love cat food. Wait, that mic isn't on, right? Thank you all for watching, and with that said, end of the video.